With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations.
So, it is official. Princess Catherine has been handed a new royal title by King Charles, and Camilla is said to be furious. Not disappointed, not merely surprised, furious. This was not another palace honor. The title came with real authority, and by the time Camilla learned what Charles had signed, Catherine was at the center of the monarchy's future. The decision was revealed during a private gathering inside Buckingham Palace in London, behind closed doors. Charles stood at the head of the room with a sealed document in his hand. William was there. Princess Anne was there. Catherine stood beside the king, calm but tense. Camilla entered last, expecting a family discussion. What she walked into was an announcement. Charles did not waste time. He said the crown needed one trusted figure to protect its most important traditions, as William prepared for the responsibilities ahead. Then he turned toward Catherine and named her royal guardian of the crown. The room went still. The title had never been announced, yet the document had been signed, witnessed, and prepared to take effect immediately. At first, Camilla appeared to treat it as ceremonial language, another honor, another addition to Catherine's position. Then Charles began listing what the title controlled. Catherine would oversee royal regalia, work with officials connected to the crown jewels at the Tower of London, guide state banquets, and help shape the preparations surrounding William's future reign. The meaning became impossible to ignore. Catherine was not being invited to observe the monarchy's future, she was being authorized to organize it. Royal heirlooms, state occasions, ceremonial displays, historic symbols, all of them would now pass through her office. Every responsibility touched territory Camilla believed still belonged to her. The deepest insult was not the title itself, it was the timing. Charles had made the decision without consulting Camilla, even though the role reached into duties of the Queen beside him. She had expected to retain influence over decisions as Charles remained king. Instead, she was hearing the details after the decree had become palace record. Camilla looked around the room and noticed something unsettling. No one appeared shocked. William knew, Anne knew, senior courtiers knew. Catherine had been briefed. The only person discovering the weight of the decision was Camilla. This was not a debate. It was a transfer of trust, and she had been brought in to witness it. Then Charles reached the final page. He slowed down. His eyes found one paragraph underlined in ink. Camilla followed his gaze and stepped closer. Catherine remained silent. William's expression tightened. Anne did not move. Whatever had been written there was more important than the title announced earlier. Before Charles read it, Camilla asked whether her office had been consulted. Her voice was controlled, but everyone heard the anger beneath it. Charles gave one answer. No. The word landed harder than any speech. Camilla asked whether the role was symbolic. Charles looked at her and said Catherine's authority would be operational. Hi viewers, are you happy King Charles chose Catherine over Camilla, yes or no? Put yes or no in the comments. And if seeing Catherine receive the authority she deserves makes you happy, do not sit there smiling and continue watching without doing anything. Like this video, share it with every royal supporter waiting for Camilla's influence to be challenged, and subscribe. Do not celebrate Catherine's victory in silence while Camilla's supporters control the conversation. Let the numbers show which woman the public truly trusts with the future of the crown. Charles read the underlined clause. Catherine's decisions, it stated, could not be delayed, altered, or overturned by the Queen Consort's household. The words carried brutal clarity. Camilla had not simply been excluded from the appointment. Charles had written her office out of the chain of command. For several seconds, no one spoke. Camilla asked whether the language could be reviewed. Charles said the decree had already been sealed. She asked why Catherine required protection from her household. This time, Charles did not answer. Instead, he placed a second envelope on the table. It was older, smaller, and marked with an insignia from Windsor Castle. Charles explained that the appointment had not begun with him. The idea had been left behind in private instructions written by Queen Elizabeth. instructions that named Catherine directly and contained one final sentence the palace had never allowed outside the family. Somewhere inside those pages was the reason Charles had chosen one woman to guard the crown and prevented the other from standing in her way. The question hanging over Buckingham Palace was simple: why now? Charles had known for years that William's reign would require careful preparation. What changed was the speed. During the previous months, decisions once left for another day had begun arriving at his desk with uncomfortable urgency. Ceremonial departments wanted clearer instructions. Senior courtiers wanted to know which household would lead future state occasions. Officials responsible for royal collections wanted one voice, not three competing offices giving different answers. The confusion was becoming visible. Inside Buckingham Palace, meetings grew longer. At Windsor Castle, private briefings became more frequent. At St. James's Palace, senior aides began discussing the same concern in quieter language. The monarchy was moving toward its next chapter, but nobody had formally decided who would protect the symbols that gave that chapter meaning. Charles understood the danger. A royal transition could not be prepared through improvisation. One disputed duel, one badly handled banquet, one public disagreement over protocol, and the palace would appear divided at the exact moment it needed to look steady. Catherine had already become the obvious answer. She rarely demanded attention in those meetings, yet officials noticed what happened when she entered them. She listened. She remembered details. She asked why a tradition existed before deciding whether it should remain. During diplomatic receptions in London, she could move from formal ceremony to private reassurance without making either feel staged. At Windsor, she studied old arrangements before suggesting changes. At state events, she understood that a brooch, a chair, a procession, even the placement of a photograph could send a message far beyond the room. That mattered. Camilla saw those same responsibilities differently. As the woman beside the king, she believed ceremonial authority should remain close to her household for as long as Charles wore the crown. Her aides had begun recommending names for departments connected to palace presentation, wardrobe planning, guest protocol, and state hospitality. Nothing appeared improper on its own. But the pattern concerned Charles. Temporary influence was slowly hardening into permanent control. He did not want the next reign inheriting a private network it had never chosen. William raised the matter during a late meeting at Windsor Castle. He did not accuse Camilla. He did not need to. He told Charles that the monarchy could not wait until succession to decide who would guard its traditions. By then, every uncertain department would already have chosen sides, and every quiet rivalry would be harder to remove. Charles listened without interruption. William then named Catherine. The suggestion did not surprise him. What surprised him was how quickly it felt inevitable. When Catherine was told, she resisted. She feared the title would be seen as a public rebuke to Camilla. She worried that every banquet, every duel, and every appearance would be turned into evidence of a rivalry she had never asked to join. She told Charles that respect for the present reign mattered as much as preparation for the next. Charles agreed. Then he told her this was not about popularity, it was about continuity. He explained that the crown needed someone capable of carrying its traditions forward without treating them as personal property. Someone trusted by William, respected by Anne, and understood by officials who would still be serving when the next reign began. Catherine did not answer immediately. Silence became its own reply. But Charles had not reached that conclusion alone. Months earlier, he had asked Windsor Castle to locate a small group of private instructions left by Queen Elizabeth during the final years of her life. The request was handled quietly. No broad archive search, no public record, only a sealed collection kept apart from ordinary correspondence. An archivist arrived at Windsor on a grey morning carrying a locked red case. Charles opened it alone. Inside were handwritten notes, typed memoranda, and private observations about the future of the monarchy. Some concerned William, others concerned the children. One document carried Catherine's name across the top in Queen Elizabeth's unmistakable handwriting. Charles read it once, then again. The final paragraph forced him to sit back. Within minutes, he closed the case, summoned a senior aide, and gave one instruction. Princess Anne was to come to Windsor immediately. Anne was not being called as a witness. Charles needed the one person who understood their mother's instincts, guarded her wishes, and would recognize whether those pages contained guidance, warning, or a decision the family could no longer postpone. Because whatever Queen Elizabeth had written about Catherine, Charles knew Anne had to see it before anyone else. Princess Anne reached Windsor Castle before noon. She came without an entourage, entered through a courtyard, and was taken directly to the room where Charles waited beside the locked red case. No tea was offered, no small talk followed. Charles opened the file, placed Queen Elizabeth's handwritten note between them, and watched his sister read in silence. Anne did not rush. Her eyes moved across every line, then returned to the final paragraph. Charles asked whether their mother had intended Catherine to receive ceremonial responsibility during his reign or only after William became king. Anne read the wording again before answering. Their mother, she said, had been thinking beyond titles. She had been thinking about custody, continuity, and control. That distinction changed everything. A title could be decorative, custody could not. Anne explained that whoever guarded the crown's traditions would not own the jewels, regalia, or historic objects connected to the monarchy. The authority would be narrower than ownership, but far more important than appearance. It would determine who advised the king, coordinated with the royal collection, prepared symbols used at state occasions, and protected those symbols from private rivalries. Charles understood the implication. The role would sit between ceremony and succession. Anne began outlining what it required. Catherine would review how major heirlooms were presented at Buckingham Palace. She would work with officials responsible for regalia kept at the Tower of London. She would be consulted before important pieces were selected for state banquets, diplomatic receptions, and national ceremonies. She would also help prepare traditions likely to pass into William's reign. Not every decision would be hers, but no important decision could move around her. That was the power. Charles asked whether creating such a position would provoke Camilla. Anne gave him the kind of answer only a sister could give. Camilla's reaction, she said, could not be the standard by which the monarchy prepared for its future. If the title was necessary, delaying it to protect one person's comfort would only make the eventual conflict worse. By evening, Catherine had been asked to come to Windsor. She arrived expecting a discussion about future duties. Instead, Charles showed her the draft decree and the private note carrying Queen Elizabeth's handwriting. Catherine read the proposed title, then looked up without celebration. Her first question was not about authority, it was about Camilla. Had she agreed? Charles said no. The room tightened. Catherine asked whether Camilla had been consulted. Charles again said no. He explained that consultation would have turned the appointment into a negotiation before Catherine understood what was offered. Every responsibility would have been reduced, redirected, or divided until the title sounded impressive but controlled nothing. Catherine remained uneasy. She had spent years avoiding open competition inside the family. Accepting this role would place her directly in the path of a woman who believed ceremonial authority belonged to the Queen's household. One signature could transform silent tension into a visible struggle. William told her that refusing would not end that struggle. It would only decide who won it. Catherine walked toward the window overlooking the grounds. She asked for time. Anne allowed the silence to stretch. Then Charles gave Catherine the assurance she had not requested. The role would never be used to humiliate Camilla publicly. Its purpose was protection, not punishment. Catherine turned back and made one condition. No decision taken under the title could be presented as a personal victory over another member of the royal family. The office would speak in the language of service, continuity, and duty. Nothing else, Charles agreed. But he did not remove the clause protecting her authority. That clause had been written after a warning from senior courtiers. They believed Camilla's household would attempt to slow the arrangement through procedure, competing advice, and questions over jurisdiction. Charles therefore stated that Catherine's decisions could not be delayed or overturned by the Queen Consort's staff. The decree was prepared that night. The next morning, an official connected to palace events received new reporting instructions. Preparations for an upcoming state banquet would now pass through Catherine's office before reaching the king. The message was administrative, brief, and easy to misunderstand. It did not remain secret for long. An aide carried the news to Camilla before lunch. She read the instruction twice and immediately recognized what others had missed. Catherine's title was already functioning. Officials who had once approached Camilla's household first were being redirected. Camilla called Charles. She demanded that the announcement be postponed until the language could be reviewed. Charles listened. Then he refused. There was a long pause. Camilla asked who had persuaded him. Charles looked at Queen Elizabeth's note lying open before him and answered with one sentence. The decision, he said, had been waiting longer than any of them knew. The family meeting was called for the following evening at Buckingham Palace. No advisors were allowed inside, no secretaries sat against the wall. Charles wanted no competing version of what was said. When the doors closed, only Camilla, William, Catherine, and Princess Anne remained with him. Camilla spoke first. She said the title had been created in secrecy, signed without consultation, and given powers that reached directly into the Queen's household. Her voice stayed measured, but the accusation beneath it was unmistakable. Catherine had been placed above departments Camilla believed answered to her. Worse, the decree made that authority immune to challenge. Charles allowed her to finish. Camilla proposed what she called a reasonable correction. Catherine could retain the title and receive public praise, but the office should become ceremonial. No control over state banquet planning. No final voice on regalia. No direct instructions to palace departments. The honor could remain. The power had to go. Catherine looked at Charles before anyone answered. She said she would step away if accepting the position damaged the family or weakened the king. There was no defiance in her voice. That made the room more uncomfortable. She was offering Camilla the outcome she wanted without forcing Charles to defend her. For one moment, Camilla believed the argument had turned. Then William spoke. He said Catherine should not be required to abandon a duty because another household feared losing influence. The role had been created to prevent confusion during the transition ahead. Removing its authority would restore the uncertainty Charles had acted to end. William did not raise his voice. Each sentence was controlled and final. Camilla asked whether this was about continuity or whether William was preparing his wife to replace her while Charles was still on the throne. The question landed heavily. Anne answered before William could. Preparing the monarchy for its future, she said, was not an attack on its present. Royal service was not measured by how tightly someone protected their position. It was measured by what remained secure after that position ended. Camilla turned toward Charles. She asked whether Queen Elizabeth had ever approved the title, the powers, or the clause restricting her household. If the late Queen wanted Catherine to hold such authority, Camilla argued, there should be proof. Charles opened the red case. The sound of the lock seemed louder than it was. He removed the original instructions from Windsor Castle and placed them on the table. Queen Elizabeth had not written the exact title Charles selected, but her meaning was clear. Catherine was to become the principal guardian of ceremonial continuity as William moved toward kingship. She was to be prepared early, trusted fully, and protected from interference rooted in personal rivalry. Camilla read the first page without speaking. This changed the argument. Charles had not invented the central idea to satisfy William. He had converted his mother's guidance into formal authority. The title was new, the intention behind it was not. Hi viewers, should royal duty come before Camilla's personal influence, yes or no? Put your answer in the comments. And if you are pleased to see Catherine protected instead of pushed aside, like this video, share it with another royal supporter, and subscribe now. Do not enjoy this moment quietly while Camilla's defenders dominate the conversation. Let the numbers show who the public trusts. Camilla asked to read every page. Charles allowed her to examine the instructions, notes, and signed decree. But when she reached for a smaller envelope beneath the file, he placed his hand over it. That note remained sealed. Camilla stared at him. She asked what Queen Elizabeth had written that could not be shown to the king's wife. Charles said the message concerned the reason Catherine had been chosen, not the mechanics of the appointment. That answer made the secrecy worse. Camilla accused the room of turning a private judgment into official policy. She said the hidden words were being used against her without giving her a chance to answer. Catherine remained silent. William watched his father. Anne's expression did not change. Then Camilla forced the choice into the open. She told Charles he could protect his wife's standing or strengthen Catherine's position, but he could not do both. If the decree remained untouched, the public would understand it as a rejection of her authority. She demanded that he reduce the title before any announcement. Charles looked down at the signed document. When he raised his eyes, the hesitation was gone. He refused. The appointment would be announced publicly within 48 hours. Catherine would receive the sealed decree, the historic brooch, and responsibility for the state event. Nothing would be reduced, nothing would be delayed. Camilla had entered the room expecting negotiation. She left knowing the decision was final. 48 hours later, the state apartments at Buckingham Palace were prepared for a ceremony that had not appeared on any public schedule. The guest list was small. Senior household officials, ceremonial advisors, and a handful of photographers were instructed to arrive through a private entrance. No explanation was given beyond 2 words: royal appointment. By 10 o'clock, the room had taken on the stillness of a place waiting for history. A narrow table stood beneath a portrait of Queen Elizabeth. On it rested the signed decree, a dark velvet case, and the sealed copy of the late Queen's instructions. Every object had been positioned with care. Nothing was accidental. Catherine arrived with William. She wore no tiara, no dramatic jewels, nothing that could make the moment look like a coronation. Her appearance was restrained, deliberately so. The title was meant to communicate service, not triumph, yet that restraint only made the scene more powerful. She did not need spectacle. Charles had already given her authority. Camilla entered several minutes later. She smiled for the cameras. It was polished, controlled, and almost convincing. But those standing nearest noticed how quickly her eyes moved toward the table. First the decree, then the velvet case, finally the sealed envelope bearing Queen Elizabeth's private mark. She understood what each item meant. Charles entered last and took his place beside Catherine. William stood just behind her. Anne remained near the front row, close enough to witness every word. Camilla was positioned on the opposite side of the room, visible but separated from the transfer itself. That placement told its own story. Charles began by speaking about continuity. He said the monarchy survived because each generation protected what it had inherited while preparing responsibly for what came next. Then he announced that Catherine, Princess of Wales, would assume the duties of royal guardian of the crown with immediate effect. The room remained silent until Charles finished. He described the role in careful language. Catherine would work with the royal collection, ceremonial departments, and officials responsible for major state occasions. She would advise on the presentation of historic regalia, the use of important heirlooms, and the traditions that would one day accompany William's reign. Then came the detail Camilla had feared. The authority began that day. Charles lifted the document and handed it to Catherine. She accepted it with both hands. There was no broad smile, no glance toward Camilla. Catherine bowed her head and thanked the king for his trust. She said the responsibility belonged to the crown, not to the person temporarily carrying it. Several officials exchanged looks. The sentence was gentle. Its meaning was not. Charles then opened the velvet case. Inside rested a historic brooch linked, within palace tradition, to senior royal women entrusted with ceremonial responsibilities. The design was modest compared with the grand pieces stored at the Tower of London, but its history gave it weight. Charles fastened it to Catherine's dress himself. For the first time, Camilla looked away. The photographers captured the moment. Charles beside Catherine, William behind her, Anne watching, the decree visible, the brooch catching the light. Camilla remained in the frame, but no longer at its center. The image would say more than any official statement, and for Camilla, that single image carried a warning. No private conversation could soften, deny, or quietly remove from the palace record again. Catherine's first assignment was announced moments later. She would oversee preparations for an upcoming state occasion at Buckingham Palace, including the presentation of several royal heirlooms and the ceremonial seating plan. Officials who had previously sent recommendations through Camilla's household were instructed to report directly to Catherine's office. The transition was immediate. After the ceremony, Camilla followed Charles into a private corridor. She asked whether he understood what the photographs would suggest. Charles said the photographs would show exactly what had happened. A duty had been assigned. A future had been prepared. Camilla accused him of using Queen Elizabeth's memory to justify excluding her. Charles did not raise his voice. He told her the hidden instruction had not been written to diminish the present queen. It had been written to protect the monarchy after his reign. That answer stopped her, because it confirmed her deepest fear. This was not temporary. Back inside the state apartments, Anne approached Catherine with the smaller sealed envelope. Charles had authorized its release. William watched as Catherine took it, but Anne did not allow her to open it there. Not in front of officials, not beneath cameras, not while Camilla remained close enough to see. Anne told Catherine the final page explained why Queen Elizabeth had chosen her above every other royal woman. Catherine looked toward Charles. He gave a single nod. The ceremony had ended. The real judgment had not. The sealed envelope was opened that evening inside a private sitting room at Windsor Castle. No photographers remained. No officials waited beyond the door. Only Charles, William, Catherine, and Princess Anne were present when Catherine broke the seal and unfolded the final page left by Queen Elizabeth. For several seconds, she said nothing. The handwriting was familiar, careful, measured. The note did not speak about jewels first. It did not praise popularity, fashion, or public approval. Queen Elizabeth had written about restraint, patience, and the discipline required to stand near power without allowing power to become personal. Catherine read every line slowly. The late Queen described how Catherine had entered royal life under relentless attention, yet resisted the temptation to answer every criticism. She had learned before demanding, watched before acting, served before expecting recognition. Queen Elizabeth believed those qualities mattered because the crown could not safely be guarded by anyone who treated its symbols as private possessions. Charles watched Catherine reach the final sentence. Her hands stopped moving. William saw the change in her expression and stepped closer. Anne remained still, as though she had been waiting years for those words to be heard by the person they concerned. Charles lowered his eyes. He already knew what came next. Catherine read it aloud. Catherine must guard the crown because she has never asked the crown to serve her. The room fell silent. There it was. The reason behind the title. The reason Charles had refused negotiation. The reason the decree protected Catherine from interference. Queen Elizabeth had not chosen Catherine simply because she would one day stand beside William as queen. She had chosen her because Catherine understood that royal authority belonged to the institution, never to the individual carrying it. Charles admitted that the sentence had settled the question for him. He could have waited until William became king. He could have allowed the same departments, private loyalties, and competing offices to remain in place for years. But delay would only make the eventual transfer more bitter. The future had to be prepared while he still possessed the authority to protect it. Anne agreed. Transitions, she said, were never secured after they began. By then, uncertainty had already found a home. Staff had chosen loyalties. Traditions had become weapons. Private influence had wrapped itself around public duty. Queen Elizabeth understood that danger, and her instruction had been written to prevent it. Catherine looked down at the page again. She did not smile. Instead, She asked Charles to keep the final sentence out of the public announcement. Releasing it would turn the appointment into a public judgment on Camilla, and Catherine refused to begin her new responsibility by humiliating another member of the family. The words would remain private. The duty would speak for itself. That decision proved the note correct. Because Catherine had just been handed the sharpest weapon in the entire dispute, and her first instinct was not to use it. Camilla eventually learned the meaning of the sentence. Not from Catherine, not from William. The words reached her through someone who had seen the private papers before they were returned to Windsor. She reportedly listened without interruption, then asked to be left alone. What could she say? Her title remained. Her place beside Charles remained. She would continue attending state occasions, receiving guests, and appearing before the public. Nothing visible had been removed overnight. Yet the institution had drawn a line beyond her reach. Catherine now held responsibility for what came next. The crown jewels were only part of it. The banquets were only part of it. The brooch, the decree, and the official photographs were symbols of something larger. Charles had identified the woman trusted to carry royal tradition from his reign into William's, and he had done so while Camilla was still queen. That was the wound she could not dismiss. She had feared Catherine was being prepared to replace her. The truth was more unsettling. Catherine was being prepared to outlast her. To every viewer who believes Catherine earned this trust through years of restraint, service, and loyalty, this is the moment to make that support visible. Like the video, share it with someone who has waited to see Catherine protected from palace influence. Subscribe now, because celebrating quietly allows Camilla's defenders to pretend the public feels differently. And leave one word in the comments: Guardian. The new title did not place a crown on Catherine's head, it placed the crown's future directly in her hands. But the struggle was not over. In the next video, one missing name on the Buckingham Palace state banquet seating plan will expose who challenged Catherine's first order, and why a red folder delivered at 11 minutes past midnight forced William to return to Windsor before sunrise.